This is ChangeMakers with Katie Gore, finding the right solutions for the affordable housing community.
This week's ChangeMaker is Ivory Mathews, the Executive Director and Chief Executive Officer for the Columbia Housing Authority, the largest housing authority in the state of South Carolina. Prior to joining Columbia Housing, Ivory served for 5 years as the Executive Director of the Greenville Housing Authority, and she spent nearly 20 years in the industry. Ivory, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you so much for having me.
So Columbia Housing Authority is the largest housing authority in South Carolina, and what an honor to guide housing policy and advance housing issues. So you've been in this role for a couple of years. What did you first decide to tackle, and how are you charting out your action plan right now?
Awesome. Great question, Katie. I'd like to start with first kind of the landscape of Columbia before I got there. Columbia Housing Authority, as you mentioned, is the largest housing authority in the state of South Carolina. It sits right in the city's capital. And 6 months prior to me joining the Columbia Housing Authority, in January of 2019, the agency was hit with a very tragic event. 2 residents sadly lost their life due to carbon monoxide poisoning in one of Columbia's housing's oldest public housing communities. Immediately, it became just a very difficult thing for the community to deal with, certainly for the families who were experiencing this tragedy. And the incident made national news. When those types of things happen in housing authorities, it causes a lot of, public concern, public outcry. And I joined, moving fast forward. Incident happened in January of 2019. There was a tremendous turnover on the board of governors in May of 2019. And then I joined the agency in July of 2019. So when I joined, one of the first things that I did, because I worked in the state of South Carolina and because I'm very close to what's going on, I try to have my pulse on what's going on in the affordable housing industry. I knew a lot about some of the things that the agency needed to work towards in order to do the heavy lifting to regain public trust. And so I joined July 1 of 2019. July 5th, 2019, I held a press conference during a special call board meeting where we had all of the media sources there. The community was there. It was broadcast live on all of our social media platforms where I laid out a 12-month action plan. And that 12-month action plan was brought about because it was solely focusing on what I heard from the residents, from the Board of Commissioners, from community leaders, from the public, from grassroots organizations, and that was they wanted to have this housing authority restore its responsibility of putting residents first, transparency and accountability, creating an organization that was operationally efficient, and they wanted to know what about the business opportunities that existed in that community so that folk who were on the ground in Columbia, who had the skills and expertise to come in and help this agency do what it was designed to do, and that is create quality, affordable housing for our families in our community. And so that's how the 12-month action plan started.
Well, that action plan, that's very bold for you to be on the job for only, 15 days and to hold a press conference. I've not heard of that approach very often. You really walked right up to that line. But what's so impressive is that is something that you said. You said that you heard what they were saying, and then now you're backing it up with action. And those are always the great signs of leadership. So how has your action plan been embraced by the community when you fast forward now today? Is the credibility and the development plans, are those all panning out like you and the community had envisioned them?
Oh, absolutely. One of the best things about having an action plan and making it available to the community, and that action plan has measurable actions that people in the community could evaluate the agency on, is huge. And that was the big part of us working towards regaining public trust. And so I immediately made myself available to the media, of course, to my residents, to the community. And we did it in a way where anytime there was discussion about what was going on in the agency, we pointed back to the 12-month action plan to say, within the first 12 months, for example, we promised the community that what we would do is do a comprehensive assessment of our entire housing portfolio, because we wanted to know we wanted to have an evaluation that was done from a third party entity to come in to tell us exactly what were the real conditions of our portfolio. Do we have portfolio that needs to be completely demolished? Do we have parts of our portfolio that we can comprehensively, do a comprehensive renovation? And throughout the first 12 months, we were able to accomplish everything that we told the community that we were going to accomplish. And so when we finished completing the assessment of every single unit that we own, we told the community, we came out, we had a public meeting, and we said, community, we just completed this assessment. And as a result of us completing this assessment, we have some heavy lifting to do. Our portfolio is not in a place where we're happy about. We aren't offering the best quality housing situations for anybody that currently rents from us. And we're not proud of where we are. But in order for us to get there, we're peeling back the onion. We're letting you know that we have over $250 million of deferred capital needs in order to bring our portfolio up to current standards. And in order to do this, we know that we don't have the federal resources that currently exist because of just years and years of decreased federal funding. We said that we have got to put out a solicitation, and we're going to put our entire portfolio in the solicitation, and we're looking for development partners. And we're looking for some of the best development partners in the country who can come in, who understands how to do the heavy lifting to help us bring our housing stock back to where it needs to be. And so we launched Vision 2030. And so Vision 2030 is our housing redevelopment strategy where we're actually super excited. It's a very aggressive and bold plan, but I think we're headed on the right track. Right now, we have 2 deals that are due to close in November, which will be new construction projects. And we're super excited about that. And I think we're headed in the right direction.
So, is there a category over the next few years, and with all of this $1 million of investment, is there a specific category that you guys have focused in on, or has it just been had to evolve for community by community? So does it look like you're renovation, demolishing, building new, or all of the above? Is there something specific there?
We have, we call them buckets. So we have all of our developments. We have 8 national development partners, and each of our partners were carved off sections of our portfolio to work on. And so I will tell you that it is a gamut of some of everything that you can think of as it relates to redeveloping affordable housing. So we have some properties that we're going to just use the 4% bond program. Some will be, we're going to submit a 9% competitive allocation to develop those projects. Some are just completely, we actually have a number of our units right now that we've submitted to the Special Application Center in the HUD office in Chicago to get approval to demolish those units because they're no longer salvageable. But very few, I would say less than a third of our portfolio meets the category of comprehensive renovation.
So what's the goal? How many additional units do you think you'll be able to bring online over the course of this plan?
So over the course of this plan, what we envision that we'll be able to do based on, because what we did was we took a look at the entire public housing portfolio that existed at the height of Columbia Housing's public housing portfolio. So they had 2,911 public housing units. Today we have 1,600. Just over the years, they've lost some units. And so our Vision 2030 plan includes bringing back those 1,300 units that they've lost over the years to bring back the entire portfolio to 2,900.
Well, I'm sure your waiting lists haven't gone down, so I can assume that your demand is still quite robust. I mean, give us an idea of what the need is there in your community.
The demand is very daunting. We last opened our I'm going to take, for example, our housing choice voucher waiting list last year, and within the first 48 hours, we had already taken like 8,000 applications. With public housing, anytime we open our public housing waiting list, the same thing. Within the first day, we'll take, anywhere between 4,000 and 6,000 applications. And so we try not to have our waiting list open so long that it sets an unrealistic expectation that people will receive housing. And so we try to make that waiting list time frame short, no more than 2 to 3 days, because we can easily take, if we had our waiting list open for a week, we could easily take 20,000 applications.
So you said that you've had anywhere from 8,000 when you opened the waiting list to, potentially if you kept it open even longer, to maybe 20,000. And so clearly the, almost 3,000 units that you're trying to provide and get in place doesn't really address the demand, and this really isn't a dynamic of Columbia or South Carolina. I know that you're on several national panels and we see this across the nation. How do you think, this is going to, impact how you continue to advocate for Columbia and South Carolina? What efforts are you seeing that you guys can be as a solution here for your industry?
One of the things that we recently started at Columbia Housing is the state of South Carolina in our public housing law, and many states have this same language in their law, which will allow housing authorities to issue or be a conduit for issuance of, multifamily tax exempt bonds. And so we just started here in South Carolina as serving that role for private developers who are willing to either acquire properties and rehab them and make them available for individuals of low to moderate income families. And we've also have been a conduit for multifamily private developers who are looking to just build. One of the things that just recently happened in the state of South Carolina, and me and my colleagues have played a very important role in this, is we lobbied for or advocated and working with folk who could actually lobby on our behalf for the last 2.5 years to our General Assembly to pass a law in the state of South Carolina to allow state tax credits. And so that law became in effect. It's been in past about a year now. And so that has made it very appealing to private developers because now they can come in with the equity that they're going to bring to the table with the state tax credits and also with the federal credits. Now they can make the deals work in South Carolina. And so South Carolina is in an interesting space right now of being able to develop and preserve more affordable housing units. It'll probably be the first time in our history that we'll actually tap out on our bond cap. So that's another thing that we're looking at right now. So that's one of the big things that housing authorities have been able to expand to be able to bring more units made available for people in our communities. Another point of emphasis that we have done here in South Carolina is that we have had lots of conversations with people in the economic development arena. For example, our Chamber of Commerce. So we have been working and meeting with our local Chamber of Commerce is to say that whenever you do your legislative agendas for the year, please consider including affordable housing because jobs need a place to call home. Mm-hmm. So if you're recruiting most of the jobs that are recruited in the state of South Carolina are jobs that do not pay enough for people to rent without paying 50 to 60% of their income towards rent. They're low paying jobs. And I imagine that, this is certainly not unique to South Carolina. So, but we have had some success with our local chambers saying that makes sense. We're on board. So we're super excited about that movement.
That's a great strategy move that I don't know if a lot of housing authorities actually seek out their chamber to make the connection of economic development and rent stability and wages and the ability to attract, new places of employment. And when you think about it, a rent burden has a rippling effect. I know that South Carolina has some of the highest eviction rates in the country, for example. What are the dynamics that are happening there?
That discussion goes on a lot. It has been going on a lot in our grassroots conversations, in our trade organizations, also in our legislature. So there have been a number of our state representatives who are trying to figure out, how do we as a community, how do we make this wrong right? How do we get off of this list of being, if I'm not mistaken, the city that I'm in, which is the city of Columbia, we're like ranked number 2 or 8 in Charleston. The city of Charleston, which is an hour and a half south of us, is ranked number 8. And that is not a good statistic that we're proud of. But our state laws around evictions makes it extremely easy for tenants to be evicted in the state of South Carolina. And so once a tenant becomes evicted, it stays on their public record forever. So it starts a downward trajectory in that family's ability of them being able to find, a unit that's affordable. We're doing the work. We don't have a solution at this point. The thing that I think that more and more people are more aware of what this really does to people, particularly since the pandemic has pulled the Band-Aid off of the impacts of people who have had an eviction on their record and what type of life trajectory that sends them from that point forward.
Well, the pandemic has surely opened up America's eyes to the impacts of housing instability, and it certainly has had a rippling effects, not just in the health impact area, but also in housing and employment. Okay, well, we have to stop right here, but coming up in the second part of my talk with Ivory Mathews, the Executive Director and Chief Executive Officer for the Columbia Housing Authority, Ivory shares why she works in affordable housing.
Each day that I'm able to give one more family the opportunity to live in a quality place to call home is something that makes me proud.
Thanks for listening to ChangeMakers with Katie Gore. To find out more about Katie, go to quadel.com. That's QUADEL.com. This has been a production of Forbes Books Radio.